it's kind of hard to tell right now because I still need to drill the second hole to mount the grill on this piece, the new piece that I built. But the grill is fitting up where it needs to be. When this is bolted down, just this one bolt here, it actually flattens this entire front panel out, and that's because this grill is all crooked and bent and kind of broken up, so we need to repair that later on. But in a later clip, you will see I'll have this entire grill fitted up against the car, bolted up into place, and you'll see the gap between the grill and the metal, so that later on when we do the final filler work, we're not loading it up with Bondo. It's gonna actually fit up against the metal and look really, really well. And this is really, really difficult to do. It takes a lot of hours. I've got about 16 hours into this piece here alone, from recreating the shape that we need to fit this grill. As you can see from that angle, this panel curves in and then curves back out, back up and around, and everything fits perfectly with the contour of the grill that we have now. So as you can see, there's a lot of time that it takes into forming all these pieces, but we want to make sure that all these pieces are formed properly so that the end result is perfect. That way we can metal finish everything after everything's all welded up, and it'll look perfect. So here's another issue that we come across quite often here. These cars are handmade, so the panels that come on the car, including the hood, deck lid, and doors, they're all made specifically to fit this body. So this hood here did not belong to this car, so we had a problem with the gap here. So as you can see, we had to do some repairs. What we ended up doing is we cut the hood right along the edges where we needed to, and we took this flange and pressed it up against the center of the hood so that we could gain this gap between the fender and the hood again. Then we retacked this piece back in and re-welded it up at 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch intervals to make sure that this panel didn't get too hot and too warped. And then we dressed the welds, and now we have a gap between the hood and the fender again. Now, if this piece looks familiar, it's because it's the section that belonged to this quarter panel here. And as you can see, it's been repaired before by somebody else. Old school techniques to repair it. We had to cut it out because it was so rotted that we had to shape this new piece of metal, 20 gauge steel, and weld it back onto the car. Now, as you can see, not only was this cut to the size of the quarter panel, but it also had to be shaped this way and this way with various tools, including the plenishing hammer and English wheel. So we broke it down here at the rocker, and we replicated the actual piece that we pulled off of there. Now, the same thing with this section here. We had to replace this because along this edge there's a piece of rod that's fit on the inside of the quarter panel, and this piece of metal here is rounded around that rod to give this quarter panel strength. Now, on the inside of this quarter panel, there's an inner fender that's also steel. So because water and moisture got back in there and started rotting not only the quarter panel away, the skin of the quarter panel, but the inside of the quarter panel also. So when this was cut out, I realized that the inside of this quarter panel was just as rotted as the outside of this quarter panel. So because of it, I had to cut a much larger section out of the quarter panel to gain access to the inside so that I could replace the inside of the quarter panel, and then I could replace the outside of the quarter panel. So not only do we have to replace the skins of fenders, quarter panels, hoods, rear sections, but we also have to, most of the time, replace the inside of the parts, because not only is this rusted away, like I mentioned, but the inside is rusted away also. So it's a lot of work that has to be done. I have lots and lots of hours into just shaping this quarter panel and making sure that it's the correct size, contour. I put the rod back in there, and I folded the metal and wrapped it around the rod from the inside so it's original like factory, and it's nice and strong and sturdy. Now, as you can see here, we have the same problem. Most of the time when we have these cars brought in and sandblasted, we see that this entire rear end of the car is made up of body filler. The metal is just not even there anymore. The only thing holding everything together is body filler. So what John did is John removed the old piece, and he had to section everything off so that he could replace the floor in here. But to replace the floor, he had to make sure that the deck lid was going to fit. We haven't yet got to the deck lid yet in this build, so we haven't shaped the deck lid where it needs to be. It's still dented and pretty rough. But as you can see here, this is where he cut the rear wings off on both sides to gain access to replace the new floor. And after he replaced the new floor, that's when he started building all this metal around here and this section around here. As you can see, he shrunk all these pieces, and that way we could fit the new valence bumper, rear valence bumper, up to this. And even the rear valence bumper, they usually don't fit. Even though they're new, they don't fit, so we have to shape them to the contour of the car. Again, each car is hand built, so we have to make sure that all the pieces that we build fit the rest of the car. Alright, so before we talked about how the deck lid and doors and hood have to fit the car that we're working on. This particular deck lid does not belong to this car, so what we have to do is we have to match the contours of this coach-built deck lid to the contours of this coach-built car. Now, here you will see the relief cuts that we had to make in the deck lid to shape this deck lid to make it fit this car. Now, what we did here is you can see all these welds down here. We plug welded the webbing from the skin of the deck lid because the webbing was just too far from the skin of the deck lid, and what that made it do is it didn't make it very rigid, so it had a lot of flex in it. So now that we have this welded to the skin of the deck lid, now it's nice and solid and rigid. So what we had to do is make all these relief cuts, and we had to stretch this deck lid out to fit the contours of this car. So what we had to do is get this deck lid on blocks, and we marked down where exactly it was that we had to stretch this back out. So with some pressure, some even pressure all the way along, pushing the corners of the deck lid out and this down flat so it would fit the contour of the car. Then we would mock the deck lid back up to the car and make sure that it fit. As you can see here, it's sunken down a little bit. The same thing with this corner, so we'll just keep working it, just the way that I demonstrated, to make sure that everything along the edges fits perfectly.